Welcome back to Chaos and Carry Ons, the podcast where two best friends, a few cups of coffee, and maybe a little bit of chaos come together to talk all things travel, family, and all the adventures in between.
I'm Stephanie, adoptive mom, travel lover, and professional overpacker.
And I'm Shelby, also a travel lover and definitely not a light packer.
Today's episode is a little different, but it's super close to my heart. November is Adoption Awareness Month, and we thought we'd take you behind the scenes of what adoption really looks like. The paperwork, the waiting, the emotional roller coaster, and finally, the we're parents moment.
I've got questions, because as someone who watched Stephanie walk through this journey, it's beautiful, but there are so many steps. So grab your coffee and let's jump in.
Okay, so before we completely dive into how adoption works, I thought I would start out with just briefly talking about how I feel that adoption comes to you. So I saw another adoptive mom actually recently who posted something. She was writing a piece about adoption and how it came to her family. She was an adoptee. But a lot of people think it's like this lightning strike moment, this neon sign that's saying like, yes, you're supposed to adopt. And that's not at all, at least for most people that I've talked to, how it goes. So this is what she said. Most of us don't get a burning bush moment. We get a tug, a question that won't leave us alone, a holy discontent that shows up in our gut that won't go away even when we try to reason it down. And most often, a calling doesn't feel like a trumpet blast. It feels like your spirit saying, I can't not care about this. And if scripture tells us anything, it's that God doesn't call the fearless, he calls the willing. So that is exactly how I felt. There was no, this is what you should do moment. It was little tiny, I'm going to say nudges, and then it was like bricks. And then it was like, okay, this is what we should do. I feel like one of the things too that I don't hate it when people say this because I know that it's coming from a good place, but they'll always immediately say, you're such a good person. And I think we've learned from this podcast that I'm definitely not the best not the best person. Like I'm very normal. We're a very normal family. So that's always the thing that I start out with is it doesn't take an extraordinary family. It just takes an ordinary family that's willing to go through the process, if that makes sense.
Well said.
Yeah, so was I scared? No, I was terrified, but it came to the point where I knew that we had to just try because I was feeling like this is what we were supposed to do. So I want this episode to be like maybe you've just decided to adopt, or maybe you haven't completely decided yet, but you're thinking, what is it going to take? What does it look like? So we're going to talk about the type of adoption that I had. There's foster, there's domestic, there's international, and then you can even do what they call a private adoption, which is self-matching. This is going to be just talking about domestic adoption, which means adoption through an agency within the U.S.
Okay, Steph, let's start from the beginning, which is the home study. So what did that look like exactly? Well, let's just say, what is that and what did it look like for you?
Yeah, so the home study is the ultimate let's see if you're ready to be a parent test. That's what we always like joke is the state thinks that we're fit to be parents, but we don't really know if we really still are. But it's basically a deep dive into your life. It's like background checks. You have to give over your financial records. Then you have what they call home visits and interviews. And it's a social worker that comes into your house to make sure that your house is safe and that you're emotionally, financially, and practically ready to adopt. So they'll have you baby proof a little bit. If you have kids, like we had kids, they do interview your kids, but it's very light. I would highly recommend that you actually look at several different home study providers and find the one that feels like a good fit for you. The one that we had she was awesome. And so after the very first visit, I never felt nervous anymore because she started feeling like a friend. It wasn't like scary or she was going to take us to jail, like if we didn't pass this test, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very intimidating, but I tell people that is the most scary part of the adoption when you're starting, but it ends up being the easiest part, if that makes sense. The cleaning is horrible because you feel like you're cleaning for the Queen of England to come to your house and inspect it. But she would always tell us, if I see an overly clean house, especially like with kids in it, then that's telling me like you're trying too hard. This is not really how you live. Like, she's like, I know. So anyway, she would always try to make us feel comfortable. And
you know what's sad? There's people out there like me who scrub baseboards on a weekly basis that would be normal for me. And then they would think that I've just been doing it for them to come.
No, she was telling me too that like she can tell like when it's all the cabinets are organized.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying.
And so she can tell the difference in you're putting on a front or this is just how they are.
Yeah, she was saying that she normally can pick it up. So she was like, I want you to be yourself. She's like, of course, I wouldn't want to come into a pigsty, but she's like, I get lived in mess. Now, granted, that very first time, Derek says that was the cleanest that our house will ever be. But after that, I didn't feel so bad if it was like a few dishes were in the sink or, you know, it looked like somebody had been in the living room, the kids, I'm saying. You know?
So once the home study's done, you make a profile book. And this is something that I had no clue. I had no idea what this is until you went through adoption. I remember like helping you pick pictures and stuff for it. But I want you to tell everybody like what exactly is a profile book?
Yeah, so after you have the home study, and usually during the home study, you'll start making a profile book. And that's basically, think of it like as a storybook that it's going to tell an expectant mother about your life. So it's going to have like photos, fun facts, what your house looks like, your values, your whole family, your friends. It's meant to connect a birth mom with you and her picturing her baby basically into your life. You know, like what does she want for her baby and what would they look like in this family, if that makes sense.
So how do the matches actually happen?
So once the home study is what they call approved, and then you have the book, you'll pick out an agency, which usually you will start trying to find an agency before you even do your home study. A lot of times you're just kind of doing that all at the same time. So the way that I found an agency was going on like different Facebook groups. And some agencies, of course, they cost more money. Some of them only take people that don't have any children. Some of them only take people that are completely infertile. Like there's so many options. There's no way I could go over all of it on this podcast. But the best thing to do is like write down kind of what you're looking for. Like if you don't want to travel very far, you know, you would find an agency that would be maybe in your state or in your area. Like if you're in the South, you'd pick one in the South. Or if you're on the West Coast, you'd pick one. You get what I'm saying. Like you would pick one that's close by. So you kind of write down like what you're wanting and then look for agencies that would fit those, I'm going to say needs or wants. But then all of the agencies pretty much do it the same. So you give the agencies your book, and usually you're giving them 3 physical copies and then you're giving them a digital copy. So they will present you with what they call a situation. And so it'll be like, I'm just going to go hypothetical. It's going to be like, let's say it's a mother and this is her first baby, but she doesn't have any family. She's not ready to have a baby. She has no help. And she is looking for some very specific things, because sometimes they are looking for some specific things. Not always, but sometimes. Maybe she wants a family that has one child, but she wants them to have an older brother, and she wants them to live on a farm, and you know, she wants the parents to be between this age. I'm just throwing out hypothetical things. I have literally even seen like she wants the family to have a dog. I know that people might think, really? But yeah, that is a thing. So you'll read over this, like, this is what she's wanting. This is the due date. All of her kind of like a very short summary of this is what this birth mother is looking for. And then if you meet that criteria and it's something that you would be interested in applying to, then you will apply or reply to the agency and say, yes, I would be interested. Then it can be as little as like an hour. It can be as long as 2 weeks. I think the longest that we waited was maybe 9 days before we heard she had picked a different family. So it's kind of like a back and forth thing. The agency is asking you, like, do you want to do this? And then you're saying yes. And then the birth mother has to say, yes, this is the family I want. Now, I should say not always. There is times when the birth mother will give over to the agency to pick the family. But for the most part, if the birth mother is going through an agency, it's because she wants to pick the family.
Mm-hmm. So every time you reply yes, you're thinking like, this could be our baby.
Yes, it's very exciting. It's also heartbreaking because you're picturing that this is hard. And so I also want to say you're leaving your bubble. There's a lot of times, I know Shelby talked about it on her cancer episode, and I'm thinking of this because we're batch recording during this time. So she was saying that when she's having a bad day, she looks at perspective. And I do that now through adoption because I saw so many situations that I think, okay, is this really a bad day? Because I have family, I have support system, I'm not having to make any life-changing decisions today, you know?
Yep.
It's really not a bad day. So that's the heartbreaking part of it. You get attached to them very quickly and easily when you're like reading about it. There's still like babies, I wonder what happened to them. I hope they went to a good family, you know?
You could also see a little bit of the mother's background on there too, right? Like I remember some cases that you were presented with, and I don't remember if you replied yes or no to them, but like you knew a little bit of background, like alcoholism, drug abuse, things like that, but not always, right? Just sometimes.
Not always, but usually. Again, that's going to depend on the agency, but if the agency is disclosing that, then they're always going to disclose it if they know it, if that makes sense. But yeah, you're going to know like how tall she is, what color hair she has. Sometimes they'll have a picture, sometimes they don't. They never tell you their names. It's just like Mama A or Mama R or something along those lines. But that is, I think, a misconception. I have noticed that people, that's one of the very first things that they ask me a lot of times is, how did you pick Mateo? I know that's a weird way that they say it, but I know what they're meaning, you know. I don't know if they just think you just show up.
Well, you see like in movies, like they're in an orphanage and they're all lined up in there, you know, like, I mean, you've seen that before where you go to the door and you pick your kid and that's it.
Yeah. And that's not at all how it is.
Yeah.
So a lot of times people ask me, how long are you matched? That also usually depends on the agency. So some agencies will not match until like after, I'm going to say 28 weeks was the earliest that I saw. And then some will wait as late as like 30 to 32 weeks. Mateo's agency, the agency that we went through, it was generally between 30 to 34 weeks when they were matching. So you're not usually waiting the whole
9 months.
9 months. Yeah. Yeah. Because you have to think most people are not going to immediately choose adoption. There's going to be a little bit of a time there where they're processing and deciding.
Okay. So let's say you get the call, you've matched. Now what?
So that's when you're usually like having the most feelings. It's the happy dance, the tears, is this really happening type of moment. And you're guarded because you're thinking, okay, this is still not final, you know, but usually they'll call you and they'll say something like, congratulations, you've been chosen, is what they'll say. And things from there start moving really fast. If you're going to have an open adoption, that's when people will start building a relationship with the birth mother and kind of getting to know them. If you're not, then usually you're just focusing on preparing for travel, where you're going to be staying if you're going to be, going to a new town, or I'm even going to say like you're going to be looking up the hospital, and places to stay around the hospital. I'm trying to think of the word, the protocol at that specific hospital, because each hospital has a different protocol for an adoptive family. Like some will give you a room and you can stay next door. Some will not. We're gonna talk about that a little bit in Mateo's birthday episode. I'm going to talk a little bit about if we could stay at the hospital, things like that.
So then there's the hard part that people don't talk about, or maybe they wonder but are too scared to ask you, unless you're like me and I just straight up asked you when you were matched. But I was totally oblivious, naive. I didn't know anything. So can she change her mind at this point?
Yes, and that's like very important to understand. So she can change her mind up until she signs the papers, and that's called the revocation period, and it's the window of time that a birth parent can legally change their mind after signing the consent. And it varies by state. Some are just a few days, some are 30 days. In Mateo's adoption, it was at signing, it's final. So once she signed, that was it. That for that particular state, it's like once you sign, that's it. There's no waiting period. So majority of the time, though, it's 24 to 48 hours is what I was going to say. But up until that moment of signing and then the revocation period, she can change her mind. But after the revocation period has passed, she cannot change her mind unless she went through great lengths to try to stop it before it was finalized. I don't think that people realize that. I still have people today who have asked, can she change her mind? And no, it is finalized.
So the next acronym, ICPC, this is a big deal for travel families. And I had heard you use this ICPC, and until we were preparing for this episode, I had no idea what it actually stood for. I just knew, I knew what it was because you had told me, but I didn't understand what it stood for. So please explain.
So the ICPC is the Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children. And that is a term that you'll hear all adoptive families use, because if you're going out of state, this is the process in which both states, the one that the baby is born in and your state, have to sign off on before you can travel. So as the social worker would put it, it's basically the two states talking to each other saying, is it legal on your end? Yes. Is it legal on your end? Yes. Okay. Yes, you can go home now. And so it can last anywhere from 24 hours up to 2 weeks. But the thing about it is you have no idea when you are going home. It's nuts. And if you've never had a friend that has adopted and had to go through ICPC, you think, what? I know even Shelby was like, you don't know when you're going to go home. You have no idea. No clue. Again, in Mateo's adoption story or birth story, I'll tell about us getting the call. It's like, hey, you can go home now, because we had no idea. Like they literally, the phone just rang. We picked it up. Hey, you can go home. That's how it was.
I could take you to the spot where I was standing. I had Taylor at the park. I could take you to the exact spot that I was standing when you called and said, we're coming home. And I don't know how far down the list I was of people that got the phone call after you did, because I had your car. And so I had to drive it back to the airport. So you had a car waiting when you got home. So I would say I was probably close to the top of the list.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say, I don't think I text or called anybody until we got in the car. I think I called Melinda, and then I called you, and then I called my mom.
And your mom is so mad right now if she's listening to that.
Yeah, because we were just like, it was like, you can go home. And then you literally just start throwing things in a bag because you're so ready to get home. I'll tell like how long we stayed and all of that when I tell about Mateo's birth story. But yeah, that part is the hardest part mentally because you just want to go home to your kids so bad. Now, if it's like 24 hours or whatever, it's probably easy peasy. But for us, I can't remember. I'd have to sit down and count it up. I think it was like 20 days that we were gone. It was hard. Now, that wasn't the whole ICPC part. Mateo was also in the NICU for a little bit. But anyway, that part is hard because you're preparing to stay somewhere, like in our case, that you have never been and you don't really know where to go, like where anything is. Here you are with this brand new baby in this town that you've never been in, and you're just waiting for somebody to call you up and say, okay, you can leave now. So that part is, I think, the most stressful part of the adoption.
Okay, so you've made it home. You've survived the first few sleepless nights, travel, all the legal forms. What happens next? Like, what's the next step after that? You received the call, you flew home, you made it, then what?
Yeah, I should have said, because I know that people have asked, do you go to court or anything like that? I think I'm going to explain that in the Q&A episode. We did not have to go to court while we were in Texas. So like you said, it was kind of like, okay, they tell you can go home now. And so then you're waiting for your finalization. It's the last legal step. And some states require more what they call post-placement visits than others. Sometimes it's 1, 2. In our case, it was 5. But a judge just like reviews everything. I want to say another thing that our social worker used to say is, you think of it like, or these extra home studies, because she can still come back and take the baby. But you're doing these to almost like, I don't want to say prove, but almost like prove to the judge the baby is doing well with this family. Like, this is a safe family. Okay, now let's make it legal. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, like I said, then the judge reviews everything, kind of like puts the final stamp on it. Sometimes you go in person. A lot of times if you're local, you'll go in person. Sometimes you'll do what do you call it? Like a Zoom. That's what most people do. We didn't even do anything. Our lawyer just went on behalf of us, and we literally just got an email. We didn't even know the day that it was happening. We just knew it was going to be like one of these 3 days. Mm-hmm. And they just sent us an email and was like, your adoption's finalized. Here's the papers. You're good to go. We were sitting in Walton's. I remember it. And Derek goes, I remember he gasped. And I said, what? And he goes, and he like showed it to me. And I was floored because it was just a normal day. Here we are just sitting having dinner. It had just been finalized and we didn't even know it. Anyways, that's like a really, like it's all over. It's all done.
So that's like when everything is final and permanent. And at that point, yes, it's sealed.
Yes. No going back then. That's kind of, how the judge is looking at it, like there's no going back now. Like at that point, and even like to say it out loud, and the social worker would say, this sounds crazy, but it's kind of like they're giving you 5 months to almost for you to back out, which you've been going through all this, jumping through all these hoops, and you thinking to yourself, why would I back out? But I'm sure there is that, one case where somebody has, but that's basically what that process is for. I'm saying the waiting period. It's just for them to make sure that you're sure and them to be sure that this should be finalized.
And now Mateo is one of the favorite parts of every adventure, all from the airport chaos to the Mickey Mouse hugs. I love that little turd.
Well, adoption has changed our life in the best way. It is full of paperwork and waiting, but I think it's worth it. I tell people, have you ever heard somebody say like, choose your hard,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that the best things are worth fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing in life is easy. Everything you have to work for. And so I don't know. Like I said, if you feel like that this is just really on your heart and you're thinking like, I'm just not strong enough to do it, or it seems too difficult, I hope that you felt like, okay, maybe I could do this. I hope you could see yourself walking through this, because it's amazing, really. It's heartbreaking at the same time. What is that one that they'll say? It tears you up, it rips your heart open, but then it sews you back up. That's the best analogy of it. I mean, I would definitely do it again to get Mateo.
He's worth it.
Yeah.
He is the cutest little Sour Patch Kid. Oh my gosh. I love him so much. Okay. Thanks for sharing your heart today. I know this is going to mean a lot to other families listening. I think we originally were not going to talk about adoption on the podcast. And this is just blanket statement. But I think people are curious, and you just explained it in a way that they might realize oh, hey, I really could do that.
Mm-hmm. So we are going to have a Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can send those in. And if anyone out there is considering adoption, know that it's okay to ask questions and take your time, because this is a journey and it's not a sprint.
All right, friends, that's it for today's episode of Chaos and Carry Ons. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and come hang out with us every Monday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time.
May your flights be on time and your luggage never lost. But if it's not, that's where the fun begins.